Ladies and gentlemen, we've got about 50 minutes left, so I think I'm going to start off with a couple of fairly general questions, and then we'll go over to the audience. What makes nuclear the right option for South Africa, the right option for any country, and the right option at this stage in time? Yves, would you like to start us off?
It's a nice question. Certainly different way to answer to it. I will speak about South Africa, not necessarily Africa today. One of the main reasons that we need nuclear is mainly in the country where you need baseload. If you don't need baseload, maybe you can use nuclear, but it's not necessarily as important as when you need baseload. And you need baseload because the economy is electricity intensive. When you have mine, you cannot have people staying in the mine because you have no energy. When you have a smelter, you need a huge amount of energy. So that means the main reason for me why South Africa need nuclear, part of the energy mix, is to, with coal, provide the part linked to baseload. Other energy, we can call them intermittent energy, like wind, solar, or others, can be used just to complement the baseload.
Okay, Mr. Polikarpov?
Well, I fully agree with Yves. Really, South Africa needs the baseload, and frankly speaking, there are now no other options. Another thing is that there's a world trend that the world is going nuclear. We have some around 400 and something reactors today in the world, but in 15 years' time, so this figure will double, and the amount of electricity produced will rise from 375 gigawatts to 500, more than 500. So this is a global trend, and the thing is that not only developed countries go nuclear, but developing countries are also embarking on the path of nuclear. And we can talk a lot about why this is the only solution for South Africa. But there are some facts and figures, but I think we'll dwell on that.
Okay. So there's a number of outfits that have done some research and put some stuff out into the public domain. And I think one of the arguments that have been put across that we should perhaps address here is that one of the arguments is that there is an adequate, or that there would be an adequate reserve margin with the current and committed nuclear generation procurement programs for the foreseeable future, given that South Africa now uses electricity at rates that we last saw in 27. So I suppose the question there would be, if there is that adequate margin, if it indeed exists, and I mean we are free to contest that notion here today, then Shane, why would it be necessary for us to invest in nuclear?
I'd like to just make reference to the current installed baseload in South Africa. Look at the current installed baseload, which is predominantly made up of coal. And yes, we've had a successful renewable program, depending on which point of reference you look at, and certainly not from a localization standpoint, as far as I'm concerned. But in terms of the current old aging coal fleet, it needs to be substituted. And if you look at when that fleet will be coming offline, then you need to substitute it with baseload. It's baseload for baseload. And nuclear is the only real option, because if you consider, it's quite ironic, in the Waterberg, there's a severe lack of water, and as you can appreciate with these coal plants, they need water for cooling. So even if there was no CO2-related obligations to reduce emissions, coal is not a suitable option for South Africa in the future. And even today, under the current IPP program, if you look at the bids that were issued, only a few bids were issued to try and make the current price in rands per kilowatt work. So coal is certainly not a sustainable solution for South Africa, and we need a sustainable solution for this country to be a catalyst for economic growth, and nuclear power stations is most certainly the correct option as far as we're concerned for that. Also, I'd just like to mention that, in the State of the Nation address last week, it's a potential illusion, this lack of blackouts that we've had. And the real question to ask is, today, what is our current production capacity sitting at? We've got installed capacity, but what is the current production capacity sitting at? And I think that you'll be frightened to see what that is today, and it's impacting severely on our GDP growth. Additionally, in South Africa, we're in the tip of Africa, obviously, and our reliance on neighboring countries to support us with our large demand means that we're in a predicament that we need to be self-sustainable, and the self-sustainability resides within nuclear power stations. And how we address the cost of that, obviously, is a question which we'll address later.
Okay. So in the President's State of the Nation address to which you referred to, he made mention of a figure of 9,600 megawatts of nuclear generation capacity that government intends to purchase, but that they would first go to market with regards to what it may cost, and they will only pursue what government is able to afford. Is now the right time to do it? Is it something that we should consider in 5 or 10 years' time? Should nuclear be prioritized ahead of coal and gas, which received some mention in the State of the Nation address, and renewables, which seems to have been kicked down the road a little bit? Or should we rather prioritize IPPs in other areas instead?
Yeah, I mean, prioritizing nuclear and how does South Africa get prepared around the 9,800 megawatts that they're proposing to build. And also coming back to what Shane was saying is looking at the capacity that we have in South Africa. You mentioned that we are using energy at the rates of 2007. I think that's a big mistake. There's a tremendous amount of energy that we are not serving because we simply just don't have any. So we've shut down a lot of South Africa's industry to accommodate the amount of available capacity that we have in South Africa. So there's quite a big urge to start putting some real baseload on the program. Blackouts is about a shortage of baseload energy. That's why we have blackouts and load shedding. It's not because of shortage of peaking power or a shortage of renewable energy. It is a dire shortage of baseload, and if you want to start addressing that, you're going to have to start addressing how do we actually move forward. And if you look at what we're building with Kusile and Medupi, that is 9,800 megawatts of coal-fired power. And I can't see that decimating the economy of South Africa. I know these are tough projects. They're more or less decimating the construction and the manufacturing sectors. But I think the economy of South Africa is certainly not embattled by those big projects. And those are also very capital-intensive projects and running out of schedule and cost as well. But just looking at whether we should prioritize nuclear above what we are looking at, in the baseload arena, you can only look at building more coal. And with our commitments as a responsible citizen to climate change and our CO2 emissions, is that the right decision? Is that the alternative we should be looking at? And honestly, that's the only other alternative. The gas-to-power programs that we're looking at are great for mid-merit and peaking. They're certainly not what you want to base an industry on because of the volatility of fuel costs and things like that coming up in the future. But they are great assets to have on a grid. You've got to balance the base load, you've got to balance the peaking, and you've got to balance the mid-merit as well. So all of these are very important. Problem is with nuclear, it takes a long time to build it. You're not going to snap your fingers and have a nuclear build program suddenly coming out of the ground and we'll have power in 2-3 years' time. You can do that with renewables, but renewables don't fulfill the requirements of a baseload program. So honestly, in my opinion, looking at the future, and I do look maybe a little bit further than foreseeable futures, is if we don't come up with a strategy right now for either building a hell of a lot more coal, and I'm talking about 20 gigawatts of coal or 20 gigawatts of nuclear, we're going to be in a tough situation in 2025, 2030 onwards. where you'll probably be lucky to have power 4 hours a day. And that's really the foreseeable future of South Africa that we need to stop ignoring and make some decent decisions today.